You're not really I'm glad you remember that guy we had? Have fun here. Yeah. Oh, really? Yeah.
That's what I was wondering. It's funny. I'll be big. You got a greater than expected volume, and you expect just to go lower. So it should be I mean, that's just I got it over. Yeah. Oh yeah. I know the welcome.
I won't do it up to you. All right, beautiful. All right, so if I think anything that might work, I'll give you a contact and vice versa.
I really appreciate it.
All right,
Thanks.
take care.
Come on in, please. We're going to get back on schedule. We have some folks who need to catch flights this afternoon, early flights, so we appreciate it if you come on in and sit down for our sort of our final wrap here with our VIPs. Let's see, that's everybody. Hello. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Inspector General. I will, quickly get out of here. I think we've met everybody. Chairman Todd, you haven't spoken yet. I've seen you around. You've been here, so maybe you met Chairman Todd. I'll let Rudy do that. But in any event, and Inspector General Dave Williams, Brody, Bueller from Accenture has spoken with us, as Pascal and Ulrich, and we'll quickly hand it over to Brody to talk with us and this panel and sort of wrap on what we think about what we've been doing and where we ought to go from here. So I'll just leave it to Brody.
Excellent. Well, so we have a very distinguished panel here, and I'll open it up to questions here in just a second. As I think about what John has fashioned here for this final session, it reminds me of a parable one of my mentors used to tell. He talked about this group of turkeys decided that they wanted to learn how to fly. And so they got a bunch of them together, they rented out a stadium, they hired a couple of eagles to come in, and they had a wonderful day. They were getting higher and higher, they're working on their dives, and really felt like they'd accomplished something. Everybody got together at the end, congratulated each other, and they walked home. So that's the question I'm going to pose to the panel here, is how do we avoid walking home? What do we take from the day and a half that we've spent? The things that we've heard, insights, trends, innovations, how do we take that and start to turn that into action? So I'll ask each of them to take a moment to reflect on the conference, to think a little bit about what that action might be. And then after each of the speakers for the panel have had a chance to give their opinion, then we'll open it up to you for questions that you have for this group. Ulrich, perhaps we begin with you.
For me, it was very interesting. I learned really a lot. That's one of the main reasons why I joined this 2 days here in Washington. We learned a lot about the trends and what's going on in our industry. For instance, that we are seeing a shift from the sender to the receiver, the push to pull, and e-commerce, who is growing. It's a big opportunity for us, mainly also in the international business. But there is always is also a but. If I can tell you a short story, actually, because the mail, the volume is declining. There is something more what I'm very happy with. Nobody said in these 2 days that the mail will really disappear. Mail is my business. And it will be also a business in the next 5 years. But it is declining, that's true. And because of this, some hosts are actually already thinking about to do the delivery no longer 5 or 6 days. I think New Zealand Post is thinking about to do the delivery only 3 times a week. And if really the receiver is our major customer, so shouldn't he then not also pay for the service? And our former CEO, he thought 5 years ago, he thought about that, to charge to every Swiss household a flat fee to get the mail delivered 6 times a week. And then we had a big discussion. All the journalists have written about this, and our CEO, he was then fired. Because, yeah, that's true, because the Swiss, they really didn't like to pay a flat fee to get the mail. So in my view, the customer is always the person or the company who pays the bill at the end of the day. And actually, I must say to you that, at least in our case, it's the sender who pays still the bill.
Thank you. Pascal, your thoughts on the conference and action?
Thank you. Of course, I was mentioned several times during this conference, and We performed at the UBU early this year a risk analysis revealing that the major risk UBU has is the relevance of the organization. And I was, at least during those 2 days, sure that we will be there in a couple of years because, for instance, talking terminal use or customs, we are talking these kind of things since 20 years. Nothing to do with the e-commerce, but nevertheless, and it is essential to discuss further these kind of things. Above all, we are talking remuneration. Everybody was talking business model, and this is what also at the UPU level, we want to make sure at the end, we want to be also a trade facilitator worldwide. We were talking with a very interesting example during those 2 days, and for me especially, it was interesting to better understand your market, your country. But nevertheless, I will be tomorrow, the day after tomorrow in Japan, and it will be maybe completely different. Here the perception at the end of the day, the role of the UPU, but also the role of all the market players, postal players or private, is to make sure that at the end of the day, there is a growth in economy. The vision of the UPU is to help the economic growth, is not to kill anybody. So I do think it is important that we make sure we, at an intergovernmental level, you maybe as a private company, that at the end of the day, we can set up solutions. The challenge for the UPU is to make sure that at the end of the day, we can create a worldwide network for e-commerce. For us, it's not who will deliver at the end of the day. It's up to the country to decide. There is a principle, the system, how do you call that in English? But I will find the term. But nevertheless, every component, the 192 components of the UPU are on their own. And coming to the UPU, they have to find out solutions. We are the keeper of international treaties. And it is important, and here I will also talk to our partners, of course, the regulatory commissions and the Office of the Inspector General, because at the end of the day, those are also partners for us. And we listened this morning to Jim or to Joe. Those are, of course, obviously partners at the end of the day. At the UPU, US is one. So it is for Switzerland, the same for Japan, the same for China. And I am very much looking forward to continue this kind of discussion, both with private, with also public and designated operators, but also having in mind that we are looking for solution for the growth in the economy at the end. And the customers, of course, everybody reminds us that the customer is important. Of course, customer satisfaction with all our customers. But we do have to mention also that it's important to keep a global vision when we are talking global economy like e-commerce.
And I think your point is spot on there. One of the things that we're clearly seeing as a trend in the market is the growing importance for smaller and smaller businesses of that cross-border component. That's where they're planning their growth. That's where they're seeing their best opportunities. And so to take that friction out and knit those organizations together into a global network is a big effort, but a big opportunity as well. Excellent. Dave, your thoughts on the conference and
Thanks,
actions?
Bert. Really good conference. John, you've asked me to be on this panel a couple of times. I'm beginning to suspect that you're using the same method they use when they select older actors to become the spokesman for the reverse mortgage industry. But anyway, here I am. I got a lot out of the conference. I have all of them, but certainly this one. First lesson, keep up, no matter who you are. You're not too big, you're not too secure. Mailers, the Postal Service, Customs, certainly, international bodies, nation states, anybody can get in the way when things are moving this fast. And if you try to stay out of the way, you risk the certainty of becoming embroiled and blowing off the world stage just in the winds. Access the new systems of the world. You'd be crazy not to. Platforms, exchanges for all of the instruments, the legacy instruments, new instruments in finance and elsewhere. Be an intermediary, help the public, help the progress of the nation by enabling people to use the new awkward systems that are emerging early on in the digital era. Portals, identification portals, opening doors to it all, be the center of that. Velocity doesn't matter without focus. The Postal Service in the United States has achieved an astounding optimization effort. But now the emergency becomes the end game. Who are we now? Agility matters, and democracies are deliberative. That's a problem, and it's a problem that's going to haunt us increasingly. But both as in democracies and for international organizations, will we have the agility to matter in a time of great change? The USO could become digital. I don't view that as threatening. I view that as helping lift an enormous burden and freeing up capacity for us all. And Brody's admonitions, be scalable. If you can't be scalable, and we probably cannot, be leveraged. And your third option is simply to die. There's not another possibility. Be leveraged, diversify, either by offering your own services or becoming a platform for others. Shorten the distance. We're positioned really well, but nobody has a stronger neighborhood presence than the U.S. Postal Service. Enable free shipping. We can't do that, but we can get closer than anybody because of our delivery is anyway delivery. We're at that door anyway. And speed. We're at the edge, but that revolution is in progress, which we heard about, and we can never declare victory until this is over, and that's going to be some time. Who's the customer? The person that pays is the customer. But no network provider would ever allow a customer to endanger the network, to slow the march of increasing value, or to abuse the users. Otherwise, we'll have no one paying us. There aren't going to be any customers if we don't protect the users and increase our value to them. I think there's a huge market for residual infrastructure services. Everyone's fleeing to digital, but they're leaving behind fragments that alone can't pay for themselves, but together could be very profitable. I think of our own postal, e-commerce, e-health, financial services, and soon a serious effort on e-government's part. All of those can flee to digital, but they're going to leave behind essential services that we could provide as an infrastructure for the people. We just have to remember, if we take that over, that our job, it's good that that's profitable. We have to remember that our job is to pull friction out of commerce and provide and minimize the transaction costs. That's not a nice thing. That's our only reason for being. And then lastly, become a network matter stream. We're drowning in torrents of data. We really don't need that much more, but we need to map the internet to ourselves. And we need to map the Internet of Things and the Internet of Postal Things to ourselves. Incoming is absolutely unlimited. We are very limited. What are we going to do about that? And we need dashboards and visualization to make sense of this sea of information that could be world changing.
That's a lot to react to. I can already see the gears turning, but I like the concept that is really the foundation, which is that connecting. Right? And it's a connecting on communication, it's connecting of goods, it's being that intermediary that enables commerce, and that is the role of all of these delivery companies. So finding the right role to play in the future will be an interesting endeavor. Robert, your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you. I come to this from a perspective as the head of our regulatory agency in the United States. And so my reflections, I think, are within that channel from the government perspective of our United States Postal Service and where's it at and where's it going. And I think one of the highlights throughout the last day and a half, and it was hit upon this morning, one of the themes throughout all the challenges are money and data. These are opportunities, these are also challenges. It costs a lot of money, whether it's the customs improvement we're talking for the post, or opportunities to streamline and get more efficient, but there's a lot of growth opportunities as well in the mail and the parcel market. And then we need data to operate those systems or the data to actually facilitate the commerce. So those are two key things that overarchingly, I think, have to be in the mind of as we look at the solutions going forward. And the biggest takeaway that I walk away from is just the confirmation that the traditional marketplace that the posts have operated in is quickly disappearing. And we're in a time of immense change. We have been for the last decade, but we are really in the midst of a lot of transformation. And that has a lot of unintended consequences and consequences that have to be dealt with. And from, again, my foxhole, it's how does that impact the United States Postal Service and the enormous role it plays in the United States and its economy. And there's issues that come up from it as it transitions from a large focus on letters and that type of mail to parcels and packages. That has implications for its infrastructure, its revenue, its funding. And this idea of ensuring undisturbed competition as it seeks ways to survive and thrive. We are in a very vibrant marketplace, and whether it's the international discussion we had this morning or within our own domestic markets, how do we ensure that the competition issues are dealt with? And lastly, I'd leave it with, for me, it's a big public policy challenge. You mentioned, what do we do instead of just walking away? And these conferences, we're on number 5, have been very valuable of getting folks who may not be living and eating and breathing postal day to day, but coming together and thinking about what are the implications for the future. And that's what we need, not only the richness and experience of within the postal world, but looking at this in a different way. But for me, the biggest challenge for the future of the United States Postal Service and how it fits in is a public policy issue for the Congress of the United States. And in the U.S., we need 218 votes in the House and 60 in the Senate to pass a bill and have the president's signature on it. And I think an absent crisis sometimes in our nation, it's difficult to focus and get things passed on any issue, let alone an issue as complex as the Postal Service. But for me, the underlying principle is universal service. I mean, why else do we have a government institution involved in this marketplace today? For me, that answer is it's providing universal service to the American public day in and day out. But unlike a lot of other countries that have defined universal service with very specificity through regulation, licensing, in the United States, since Ben Franklin's days, we've done it at a 50,000-foot level with some very general prescriptions in law. For the last 30 years, we've required 6-day delivery. But beyond that, the Postal Service has had the opportunity to adapt to its budget challenges. But I would argue going forward, we need to have a conversation in the United States of what do we need from a government postal administration, and what is the cost to that? And then we can better understand how do we ensure we have a self-sustaining postal administration to meet that need? I don't know, it might be a delusional goal in this political environment that we can get to those kind of first principles. But for me, going forward, would be able to take the richness of this conference within the U.S. context and present these findings and perspectives to policymakers on Capitol Hill and hopefully move that ball forward.
So take that action to translate what we've learned here into information that gets to the policymakers and craft the right future.
I think so. You know, absent that happening, like we all know the challenges of a lot of posts, and particularly the Postal Service from their financial balance sheet, it's a mess. But there's so much strength in the system, and that's the strength that the Postal Service will continue to operate absent change. But without dealing with these fundamentals, there's worry that we're not getting to dealing with an institution and ensuring that it thrives going forward in this age of transformation.
A lot to sort through. All right, we'll open it up to the group here. What questions would you have or reactions would you have to what the panel is just around there?
It's not my opinion. I'm not going to make a suggestion, but I'm going to urge someone about some of the facilitators who have all been great in supporting this and taking on a role and actually tasks these couple days. Anybody have some suggestions or comments or observations, or are we all numb from it? Or are we good?
Hi, I'm Brian Bowers from Bell Now. So in the spirit of packages versus letter mail and the fact that, you know, the post offices primarily started off being letters and a little bit of packages. In the US, the package delivery is in some aspects been underwritten by the letter mail delivery. When and how is that going to be balanced out so that we can get to a true cost of delivery?
I can take that as the regulatory commission. But it was, and if I heard you correctly, the issue and the concern being letters underwriting packages. Costing in the postal world is about 45 years developed in the United States under the law from 1970. It's called attributable cost. It's a costing approach that anyone in the private sector would not recognize. I think the term of attributable cost was this idea of cost causation in 1970. And I think the person who wrote it in the 1970 law, someone asked, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, they'll all sort it out at some point. Over the last 45 years, the United States Postal Service has had very costly and refined systems and vibrant data that we get as a regulator and are out in the public domain on a regular basis. And there's ways to improve that, but based on what the law requires and how those costs are measured, today, as we speak, the understanding is the Postal Service is not only covering its cost and its competitive products, but collectively, as a group, contributing to the institutional costs of the Postal Service above and beyond what's required currently by regulation. And in fact, a lot of the losses that the Postal Service is experiencing are almost primarily on the market dominant side, traditionally letters, flats, and very small market dominant packages or parcels. The majority of the shipping services under the law is currently structured and that we look at, it is actually covering its cost and contributing to the overhead. Are there ways to improve costing? You bet, and that's what the commission's there for. But under the current construct, in fact, that's the growth area for the Postal Service. Of course, it doesn't have the return to the bottom line that first-class mail, particularly in the market dominant tradition, has had. So the margins get less. But I think that's why you see the Postal Service itself having undergone this transformation of changing from a major focus on letters to packages and parcels.
So that concept of transparency, maybe I'll ask you or to comment on that. Is that a problem that that you see in your world, or is that something that has been dealt with at Swiss Post?
For sure, for sure. There are very often the newspaper producers, the editors, they think that, or they are convinced that they are paying too much for the services we are delivering to them. And I can assure you that every year, or many times, several professors from St. Gallen, from Zurich, from the universities, they have a look on our calculation, and the result what we get is really every year an excellent one. But nevertheless, also in the next year, there are some doubts from some customer segments. What is the case in our company? We really have clearly separated business units, even clearly separated companies owned by the holding Swiss Post. For instance, the bank is a completely separated company, also the Post Bus, and for instance, in my case, also the company who is doing the early morning delivery. And of course, also the other every year, at the end of the year, it's KPMG who is giving us feedback that everything is correct. But it's a big issue, that's true.
This isn't exactly what you asked, but I'm not particularly worried by the mix of letters and parcels. And I think you can't really understand the Postal Service if you think literally about what it is they provide today. The last great wave of creative destruction that struck America was when simultaneously the railroads and the telegraph were introduced. The Postal Service, if you thought about it literally, would have kept plodding down those postal roads and the way. They didn't, they thought conceptually about we are there for American commerce and for America. And they were the first to the railroad, and the railroad wouldn't have done as well without us. Likewise, they were the first ones to the airlines and to the new highway system in the United States. I think you have to think conceptually about what our duty is to American commerce and to Americans. And the way ahead doesn't seem terribly troublesome. The greatest challenge is agility, not grasping and somehow clinging on to the wrong side of history.
Pascal, you had some thoughts?
Yes, at the worldwide level, you were referring this morning, Kim, to this terminal use story, and that you, of course, we are also, it's a big deal for us because at the end of the day, we have to also set up the condition for this remuneration. The intergovernmental agency is also providing solution in remuneration, at least the basis for that. And what we are doing now is trying to put all together this remuneration, the parcels, and as well as the letter system, the terminal use, in order to set up also the conditions. Joe was mentioning the study we are now doing for the next postal operation council session. Once again, it is as complicated as we have 192 members, and in all the countries, the approach, as you rightly said, for the US is the same. There are different approach to the market. For some, it is driven by social conditions. From other, much more linked with competition. And here, it's, of course, the challenge to create the right condition to negotiate this integrated solution at the worldwide level, how to remunerate the flows.
Chuck, looks like you've got the next question.
Yes, and Dave sort of partly answered it for me. In the conference, it's also good news and bad news. One of the very positive things is, I think, Gary and Jimmy coming in and they've sort of exposed us to the fact that postal services are embracing data. They have become very agile, very innovative now, which we did not get that picture last year. They're actually doing a whole lot, which is very positive. But so often I wake up and I think, as a postal industry, the world's moving at 2x, I'm moving at 1x. So I'm getting behind each day. So this agility thing within our deliberative process, I think, is a key issue. And the bad news is when I hear about the terminal dues, and the presentation was phenomenal, but 4 years to change it, it's probably a 2-year lead up. Are we moving fast enough on so many things, and should we be benchmarking our processes and figuring out how we become more agile? Because we've got to become agile while still being deliberative. So I'm not sure if that's a statement or a question.
So maybe I would pose it a little bit in a little bit different way, playing on the concept that both Dave and Robert talked about, the amount of data. Are we in a new world where the capability to update this this data is there more rapidly, and so we need new constructs? Because if you look back 20 years, 4 years is probably the right time, but maybe with the new technology, it could be faster. Ask Alan.
Yeah, there is a lot of initiatives trying to use the time. Of course, now with data, we can provide with more quick decision. The idea, and that's the reality in such an organization. At the end of the day, we are intergovernmental, so it's up to the government to decide on the format and the structure of this organization. We were referring this morning to this Postal Operations Council, but that's the wish and the will of the government to have this Operations Council. What we were able to do, and the e-commerce is a very good example, is to fast-track the decision-making process. I take just this example. Last year, 26th of March, we had a big conference in our premises on this e-commerce story with Alibaba, with others, and already in October, November, we were ready with the product. So we can provide with quick answers. Now with the remuneration, we are trying to do a little bit the same. The complexity there is a little different, but nevertheless, we are aiming at doing such kind of things. At the end of the day, it's good for the business and it's good for the economy.
If you see that we are developing these systems only every 4 years, then of course it seems that we are not fast enough. Nevertheless, I would say, yes, we are fast enough. Why? In my view, we have 3 levels of remuneration system. The basis is the UPU system, and that's an excellent system, and it's the basis for the universal service obligation. Let's see it this way. In Switzerland, I can put the mail in a bag and send it to over 190 countries, and somebody there is taking it and doing the delivery. It's a very simple system. But there is a big but. In Europe, we have the remuneration system called REAMS, with more cost related. And then, of course, I have some countries that are the most important for me. It's, of course, it's Germany, it's France, it's Austria, it's the United States. And with them, I'm developing bilateral agreements. I'm treating Germany, the German post, like a customer. So with let's say with 10 countries, I make more than 80% of the turnover. And for the others, for this universal service obligation, these 4 years are okay for us.
So there's a dual tier, and it's driven by business, which
of course
absolutely is how it should be.
I have a.
Go ahead.
Is this on? Hello?
I think so.
Alan, we can hear you. Just a couple of thoughts. There's great value in looking into the future, whether it's 2020 or whatever year you pick.
But what would be kind of interesting, I think, for me anyway, and I'm not sure about the rest of you, is also to get an understanding of the business models that are being used around the world by some of the posts. And equally important, which ones are successful. So we get a framework for the different business models out there. And then the next question in my mind would be a little debate on why do we need a postal service in the year 2025? What value would a postal service add to customers and the country further out in time? And if we can kind of nail that down or look at that, it starts to build a new business model for the postal service here or any other place, getting to some of Robert's points that he was making. The other thing that strikes me is whatever year you pick in the future that you want to look at and get to, you got to be able to get there. And the way you get there is your core products. That's where the money is. No matter what you're going to come up with, it's not going to negate the money that's coming in on your core products. And if you think of the discussion around core products, everything is around packages are growing. That's true. And the margin is not as good as some of the others. And somebody brought up the infrastructure that's going to be needed. But we're positioned well for packages. And the other thing you hear about core products is letters are declining. And that's true also. But a discussion on some of the major strategies that could be used to either grow or maintain core products or reduce the decline is worth a lot of money versus new ideas, and you kind of need that to get to the future. So those are a couple of things that when you kind of think of a conference next year or move ahead in time, you might want to build into it.
Pascal, maybe you're the right one to comment on that first question of models that are successful globally.
Very interesting question indeed, because when we faced this 2008 crisis, at the UBU we set up a study to try and see how the postal sector was impacted by the financial crisis. And there we discover that there are three business models. The one incorporating the three dimensions, physical, financial, and digital dimension. And you have some of designated operators in the world that are with the three dimensions. Swiss Post is one example, La Poste in France, others, and those were not that impacted because of the crisis. Then, of course, several others have two dimensions, like Canada Post or others. And last but not least, were a lot of posts with one single dimension being the physical dimension. But at the end of the day, what is important is to see how we can develop within all this country the right solutions. And here, there is today a tendency, and it is important also to see that, that in discussing universal service obligation and also the role of the government in the country. Now we have plenty of countries where they are developing governmental produce and services, like the passports, like for the cars, like health insurance. Because as you mentioned before, the post is everywhere. It's attending every citizen in the country. And then for the public sector, it's maybe also important to make savings in some area like health or the others, using what you already have with the postal service, because it's everywhere. Yesterday, I had the privilege to meet with the PMG, and we were talking because we together are going to Sendai for this World Disaster Risk Reduction Conference. And here, once again, when talking risk and disaster in a country, that's a role maybe for the post. After every disaster we saw in Haiti, we saw in your country, who should be there to set up once again the economy. So there are roles that maybe we can discuss further in the future that can also accommodate the price for the public. And here, talking about universal service obligation. And it is interesting, we have this kind of model in Kenya, for instance. In Belgium, a lot of posts, designated operators, being private operator or still under the 100% public, are diversifying themselves, innovating, but once again, and maybe back to a high discussion with the governmental missions.
I don't know if you need to call it the Postal Service, but this is a very peculiar time to destroy an infrastructure that deals with communications and logistics in the middle or the early phases of a communications and logistics revolution. There's an explosion of this. Surely we need something to help people navigate between the physical lives and their digital lives, to create. We are atomic structures. We're not digital structures. We need something with regard to fulfillment and the intertwining and integration of those two very important streams in our lives, data streams and matter streams. So again, I'm not particularly fond or not fond of letters or parcels or any of the other product, but I am pretty fond of the American people, I think, and the people around the world. I think if we keep our eye on them, there'll be a kind of natural selection that occurs that'll help us find the way to the future and help us define ourselves in the 21st century.
This is Brian. This is Brian again.
So, as you go down a slightly different path, it talks really about this being from a global overview. So, having been involved with several other countries and their national posts, first of all, to your point, Dave, I would not be in favor of talking about the demise of the USPS by other means. To me, it's actually a model that the other posts could or should be following. The number of people that are serviced and the efficiency and standards of delivery that are brought forth by the USPS actually are far and above what some of the other national posts are doing. So, and with, especially for what we pay as Americans for that service. So, I was not paid by the USPS today. But anyway, one of the things that I do see is that as we go forward as a global economy, and really what the three words folks were commenting about yesterday, we really do need to get to some sort of worldwide addressing strategy, because the problem that we see is that when we go from like the US to Germany or US to UK, is all of a sudden now it has to go through the whole process again as if it was brand new blue box mail into the service. And it doesn't matter what country you're going to, because we don't have addressing standards that are worldwide. In the US, we have an IMB. In the UK, we now have Mailmark, which is the new one, which is really a translation of the IMB. But there are a lot of countries that don't have automation, and therefore the standards aren't there, and therefore the additional costs and inefficiencies. So if we're talking about the future for 2020, we need to be thinking about how are we going to bring the world as a huge community together to get the delivery standards and the handling optimized. So, thoughts?
I think you're unfortunately looking right at me. I think it would be great, and I think it would be problematic if we don't. A couple of reasons: the rise of peer-to-peer communications and logistics. The second is the increasing circumvention of the supply chain. Manufacturing is sending directly to people. And 3D printing and other forces are only making that work. We do need to solve it, and it's a problem today that will become an increasing problem if the world is headed in the direction that it is.
John, you've got a
Yeah,
thought on
I
that?
actually do have a question, comment. First of all, Chairman Taub, thanks for the comments about supporting the significance of this and how it ought to be brought to policy. Lisa Sherman's not here now. She was. We actually had somebody from the Hill, who was here, sitting there a moment ago. She loved the international conversation. She's chief of staff for Susan Davis, and who is, I think, very interested in trade, not postal, but trade. And hence we had somebody from the Hill. We do have one individual, I think, from the Postal Service. I don't necessarily want to identify, but thank you for being here, perhaps. And we had representatives in the way of speakers, and they did stay with us for a while, and everybody, a lot of us know Jimmy and Gary, and they've been always very part of the community. But I'm just wondering, how do we get them to even pay any attention to what this is about? I mean, if in the state, in terms of legislation, how do they possibly think of a new postal law other than dealing with the pension issue, which everybody seems to agree with? Putting that aside, how do they possibly get around to creating a law with all these nuances without even listening to this? I know that the practice is through lobbying, and that's how we get government. And certainly they hear from a lot of the associations and special interests, as they should, and that's part of it. But in an objective format, in terms of what does society really want? How do we get to them? And I'm looking at you, Chairman Taub, because, and it's clearly Inspector General, you might have some input on this, but you brought up the question of policy, and I think this stuff ought to be heard by, and I don't know how we get there.
Yeah, but yeah, I think in some ways, as you know, 5+ years ago, this was an idea in your head. And here we are 5 years later on the 5th one, having a very vibrant conversation on an international perspective. And so a tribute to you, but I think that's the energy one brings to bear to, certainly in the United States and our vibrant democracy, that noise heard. I spent 15 years on Capitol Hill myself as chief of staff for a member of Congress, as you know, and staff director. The reality of, I think, all processes, there was a comment earlier this morning about democracies are slow. And there's a reason for that, because you need to find a consensus. And in times of quick transformation, they may not be as nimble to either respond or get to the first principles. And that's really my argument of what is it that we as an American public need from a governmental postal administration. And then you can get to some of these issues of how to restructure it. I believe there's a vibrant and important need to the U.S. Postal Service for our nation, but that has to be a decision made through Congress. So that's not a simple solution, but I think with the effort and energy you have and collectively in this room, whether it's white papers or opportunities to get that word out, I think that's the basis on which you can build, at least from the U.S. perspective.
Well, no, when you were on the Hill, and you chief of staff for Congressman Representative McHugh, as I recall, and you worked at this for years and years, and you really learned it. And thank God you're with us now to understand this. But so thank you for that understanding. But so much of this, we feel like we need consensus that the business model must change. How do they begin to even think of changing the business model if they don't really participate in this? Anyhow, it's obviously become a rhetorical question. Dave, what do you think?
Obviously, particularly on the Hill, people's lives are chaotic. They're, as I said, torrents of information and issues coming at them. We're lived by the city kind of works in this tension that goes on. I think the best thing we could do is we owe the Hill and policymakers a clear vision of our end game. We've made tremendous strides. It's been wonderful velocity. There now needs to come a time of focus. We have labor unions that are the most willing and most visionary that we will ever have. If we lose this opportunity to join hands with them, we may not make it. No, and I'm not sure we should. But we have a clear vision of who we are now and who we're about to become. Also, there are solutions that sell themselves. The second you hear it, they come alive and begin moving around. And the growth of the ideas is exponential. We need those, we get those from you and from others, but I think we need those in this environment. People recognize a good idea, and they realize that just the second they hear it, that it has beauty and simplicity and will work. And I think those are some things we owe. And I think the Postal Service needs to understand it's here. It's not entirely a matter of what they want to do. Certain things are their duty. They must do it, or they must get out of it.
I should just comment that I think with all of us do very much appreciate what you have done, the vision that you have, and serve as an Inspector General, which is quite unusual for Inspectors General to create so much strategy thinking and strategic thinking and white papers and bringing in consultants, and you're doing a wonderful job with that. And obviously they take that seriously. That's it's still not obviously there. Brody, I just, it's your session. I don't need to take it over. You want to wrap it up, and unless there's some other questions? You're the one who needs to make a flight.
Dave and I were commiserating. He's got to get to the Board of Governors.
Well, I just want to say 1 second that you mentioned the unions. I also appreciate APMU here and AMC always coming and you're listening. And thank you. You've been very contributive to this conversation.
So maybe we'll do just a quick wrap-up comment from each member of the panel. We put Ulrich on the spot last time, so maybe we'll start with you, Roger.
Sure. I think we were wrapping up this final question and answer focused on the challenge I threw out in public policy, and I don't want to leave on a pessimistic or down note. I have, like Dave echoing that, I have a lot of faith that there's immense strength in the postal system globally, but certainly from my own knowledge and perspective here in the United States, and that's the foundation that we build upon. And the other foundation we build upon really is these types of forums where, whether it's a report that comes out, a lot of the work that Dave does as the Postal Service's Inspector General with white papers, the commission itself several years ago in a mandate from under the law actually took a stab at defining universal service. We may not see the solution today or tomorrow from those, but that body of work that's out there is when the time comes, when the Congress finally looks at this is the work that they can look to and build upon, and they're not running from scratch. So if nothing else, I'm hopeful.
This is a very unusual time that we get to live in. It's almost like the Cambrian age, where there were tons and tons of, once they kind of got reduced to these very fertile swamps, there were tons of things that came out of that age. Fingers, feathers, beaks, all kinds of things came out of that. And we live in a time like that now. The table is filled with building blocks. And we've spent a lot of time identifying those building blocks and trying to understand their nature and their character. Probably the next step is to begin experimenting with structures that we can make from that enormous number of new building blocks that we have in front of us.
A lot of challenges ahead of us. As I told you already, we will have on our side this World Strategy Conference coming, trying also to figure out what would be the postal world in 2020 or 2021. Most important for us is to make sure that we can integrate all this kind of ideas and challenge that we have, both national and international level, different level of development and different expectation. We know how it works now, worldwide level. We know where the challenges are, especially when talking back to e-commerce. This Asia Pacific continent is for us, of course, an important target. But at the end of the day, it's important to bring to every citizen, to every customers, sustainable solutions so that we can, at the end, provide satisfaction for all. And in this difficult exercise, we need also to make sure that the business model behind is sustainable. So once again, I would like also to take this moment to thank you for this initiative, because it was, for us at least, you, Wendy, and myself, important also to listen from your perspective and your input.
So even if I don't know how the world will look like in 10 years, I'm very convinced that the business model will change. We will do a lot of new things. I'm sure that we will have a strong position in, for instance, in our case, in the e-health business. But not everything will change completely. Why? When I look back 10 years, what we did 10 years ago, it was not so different from what we are doing actually. We just had the internet type behind us, and where we in our case, within 2 years, we burned 200 millions, and I hope we will do not so many mistakes in the future. I'm very convinced that we will have in Switzerland a strong post bank, that we will deliver things from and transport things from point A to point B, and so I'm really very optimistic for our industry.
So as the chairman, I guess I get to give a final comment, take that prerogative. So my role within Accenture is to look at over our global post and parcel practice. So I get this broad view, and one of the things that we do each year is research, where we call high performing post and parcel research, where last year was 30 companies. We run them through a model and rank them and try and answer that question of what's working. And as we went through this research last year, one of the things that was clearly evident in the industry is that the tone had changed to one of what Ulrich just described, of optimism. There are strategies out there that can be successful. We're certainly seeing postal operators globally that are extremely successful. And that tone of optimism was then changing from what are we going to do to we just need to get at it and execute on the strategies that we've got, because we're fairly confident that they'll work. And so I guess my big takeaway from this conference is it's clear that optimism is here as well. And it's clear that this industry sits really at the epicenter of digital. There isn't an industry that's more impacted, has been or will be in the future than digital, and that makes it an exciting time. So John, thank you for bringing this group together. And if you all would join me in thanking John and our distinguished panelists.
We're near the end, and I would hope that you guys can be on your way if you like. I just want to try to keep everybody in their seats for another 15 minutes or so. We'll do that actually by kind of wrapping from our perspective, from Ursa Major's perspective and the show organizer's perspective. Brian, perhaps you could put up that last slide of mine. One thing I want to do is talk about where could we go next with this. I mean, we'll clearly do another PostalVision 2020, and that would be 6.0. That's pretty amazing to me. Of course, we're also wondering what we do when we get so close to 2020, because then it becomes nearsighted or farsighted vision. It's not a stretch enough, because we really want to keep vision in our eyes, in our mind, in our imagination, and hence always the interest in millennials and where the business is really going, and what would we be looking like, Alan, in 2025 and beyond. So we'll do that. We also, in this new partnership with the Postal Innovation Platform and with my new friend Bernard Vukovic. Is that very good? No.
Without an I.
Okay, all right, whatever. I don't know why I said change it, will you please? And who, of course, is chairman of PIP and has brought our distinguished visitors from the Universal Postal Union and from Swiss Post. Thank you for being here and supporting us. And with that, there is a little bit of reciprocity. We'll be with you in some form at your annual conference in Geneva in October. So you're all invited, and let's go over there and bring the American point of view to Europe and to your global community. So we'll be participating in that. I hope many of you, if not most of you or all of you, know that we have a website, PostalVision2020.com, and we initiated a sort of a blog there in the past year called Points of View. It's been edited and mostly authored by Ken Smith, and to acclaim in terms of the wisdom and the quality of the product. We encourage you to participate. It's literally called Points of View with an S, and we want to encourage everybody to participate in that way with typical 750-word comments, not white papers, but in a good blog format. Hangout, I think, has worked well. Thank you, Lee and Carly Brown, for managing this for us. I hope the rest of the world who is watching continues to watch has been pleased with their ability to participate this way. We welcome you to come to the next conference in person, but we have an expanded community now who is able to reach us this way. This may be the best way to reach out to USPS if you're listening, because you don't have to pay that way to come here. And yet, by the way, they do have to pay otherwise, because it's otherwise a gift if they don't, and they can't take gifts without permission. And that's why the Postal Service isn't here. They can't afford to be here, but they can't take the gift. Strange government. So anyhow, those of you who are out there in Hangout land, welcome, and spread the word, because we'll do this some more. We think what we'll want to do is take the learnings we've had here, what you've contributed through the workshops, out via Hangout, perhaps monthly. And I'd like you all to tell us what you think about that. Would you want to participate in something like that? We also are thinking that we don't want to wait clearly for another year to get people together, and that we as we discovered here, there's a lot of content and there are a lot of issues. Would it make sense to convene topical events, half day or one day, in another locations, perhaps Silicon Valley for the innovators, or up at MIT in partnership with Marshall and Allstein? This can be done, and it may make a lot of sense to do that. Let us know what you think about that and what the topics would be. Some might be the innovators. A lot of people found that to be pretty exciting, to have these people, particularly from the outside, bring in new ideas and present them. We could put a whole day together on that, and boy, that would be fun, I think. Cross-border conversation was powerful, and yet that's an ongoing issue that involves clearly everybody in e-commerce and globally. We point out that's the fastest growing part of e-commerce, at least from the U.S. perspective now. If we could really solve the cross-border problems, that would be, all the more. So perhaps that's an issue. The whole question of delivery, to Gary Revlin's issues in terms of what it's all about. Are we really moving down the value chain to the end, to where the real game is going to be played in delivery, in that missing link area, and who's going to win in that, and where's the innovation? That's the subject that may even warrant its own day of work. Policy, as we just talked about. What a difficult one that is, but if there's some way where we could somehow get together and really sort of, as an industry, bring the issues together that we want to ensure that the Congress listens to in terms of when reform does come, that and if they think it really has to be another bill that's going to stay with us, another law for another 10 years, clearly they have to do more than deal with the pension funding issue. There has to be consideration for new models. How do we get that to them? It's a question I raised. Perhaps there's an opportunity to work on that. So these are some issues I have in mind, and I would really welcome them from you all. We have surveys here, which everybody hates to fill out. I do whenever I go to a conference, and I rarely do it. I admit that. But please do it, because we really want you to be involved in this thing and take it. It's a simple survey, 2 sides, and if you only answer one question, then that would help. But we really do need your input. Of course, we'll have it up on the web, and you can do it that way, which is somewhat easier. But somehow you forget, you get buried in email, and you go home, and you never do that. So please do that. In fact, if you do that now instead of listening to me, that would be great. And so with all of that, and therefore I want to ask any comments now, any suggestions that just come up before I say Academy Award style and the music starts. So my thank yous. Anybody have any suggestions? Any comments? Was this worthwhile? I think you're all still here. It must be. Yes, there's a lunch coming, and in fact, if you want to leave, you can take it as a box lunch away. Stay for those of you who just want to be here. Any input, any comments? Okay, class. Nearly dismissed. There's one. Charlie.
Yeah, John. Absolutely fabulous conference. A lot I disagreed with, a lot I agreed with. There is there's a sea change going on. There's a sea change going on in the postal industry and among the customers. So I suggest maybe reach out to major mailers and parcel shippers at the highest levels and ask them to give you their view of the future in terms of fulfillment, in terms of markets they're going to approach, how they're going to approach, and ask them if they're getting the kinds of services they need from the Post that they are going to need to continue to build their international businesses worldwide.
That's an excellent point. Thank you. That's another constituency that is underrepresented here. Most of us tend to be sort of in the service provider sort of category, one way or another. And we rarely have many mailers and shippers specifically. I thank Gray Hair this year as a sponsor to take the idea to invite customers, and that is a great idea, and we could work on that promotionally the next time around, because we do need more mailers and shippers here to participate and reach out in some other way to them. Charlie, that's a great idea. Thank you for that. That's important. Well, listen, I don't want to force any more of this, but I do want, please, to allow me to thank a lot of people, because I think it's a long list. Speakers, thank you. You are the content. You're the experts. You're the people that the people paid to come are here to listen to. So thank you. We couldn't do that without you. Thank you for the sponsors, and I will name them this time: Accenture, Amber Road, Bell & Howell, Indicia, FedEx, Gray Hair, UPS, all as gold sponsors. It means a lot to us. You can well imagine, I think, that this is a fairly costly proposition to put on, and we couldn't do it simply on registration, especially since we don't charge the speakers, and there are a lot of them. To make the numbers work on this, we need that, and so we really appreciate it. In the silver category, Click to Mail and IMS, Kiva, Metapack for your exhibition activity. First time we've ever done tables. I don't think we want to turn this into a trade show, but I think this level of representation is wonderful. And particularly Click to Mail for Lee pushing me into this new realm of going global through Hangout. Thank you, and Carly, for executing it. And thanks to IMS for once again publishing or printing the brochure. I certainly want to thank the association partners as well, and they are American Catalog Mailers, Association of Marketing Service Providers, Association of Postal Commerce, PostCom. Wow, you guys have been incredible, Gene and Caroline. The Envelope Manufacturers Association, Global Address Data Association, thank you, Charlie. International Mail Advisory Group, and Parcel Shippers Association. Pierce, thank you. These have been wonderful in terms of helping us get the word out, encouraging us with all of this. And again, it helps us keep this as an open, all-inclusive conversation. Again, this has been great, Bernard. Thank you. We only met a year ago at our reception, and you embraced this and have really brought your team to the party. Overseas Posts, thank you for coming. And I recognize PMG from the Philippines. Yes, Josefina de la Cruz, thank you very much. We had Alfred Movica here yesterday, who is from, oh, there he is. Wonderful, you're back. Thank you. Take a stand, will you please? Alfred is from, he's the PMG, the CEO of La Poste Gabon. He's here from Africa. And with his son, I hope, we also encourage you all to bring millennials. They're important to us. And hope to cheer them in. So thank you for bringing your son. You too, Charlie, for Catherine, and I'll mention a couple others. I'll be quick now because now I can almost hear the music going. But clearly, I do thank everybody from those of you who have and signed up and come here and made the commitment to do this. This is important. We really filled the room. We had a target of 150 people. We have them. It's been extremely successful in that regard. So I thank you all as attendees. And let me say, I certainly do want to thank the most important people, the people who put this on and helped me put it on. Believe me, lots of help. Caroline Miller, I don't know, she's probably never listened. She's always out there at the desk. And Caroline, of course, supports PostCom and has been an incredible support here in supporting us. Registration, I just saw Lenny Callan duck out. She's been pretty good too, pretty good helper. John Sasso, who's new with Ursa Major Associates in PostalVision 2020. You've probably met John, he's with us full time now. And Brian Klavacki, even though he's going to, there he's got his hand in the back. Thank you, Brian. You did master the slides perfectly. Even he's now back in school at graduate school in public policy. So thank you for your time, Brian. Jeff Gruber, other than a misplug here and there, in the beginning it's been excellent. Thank you for the support on the AV side. And interns, Parker, thank you. Students from Elon and GW, Catherine Prescott, thank you. Ann Stewart in absentia due to a death in the family is the one who put the whole deal together with the Ritz. I think it's been really marvelous. Believe me, I think those of us who stayed here have appreciated a little more than L'Enfant Plaza. Yeah, the plumbing works here. In the new L'Enfant Plaza, I'm sure something will be fun. But and then let's see, the whole Ritz team, Michael Barrett, thanks a lot. We were really nervous about the survey and the workshop. And boy, the way everybody got engaged in that, I think it worked well. So Mike put that together. Thanks again, Lee and Carly on the Hangout and the Ursa consultants, Mike Comstock, of course, and Bob Reasoner and Kent and Chuck for chiming in. You'll see these guys' names in the writings and in more of the work we do. So I think we're about there. I just do want to say thank you all again for being here, and also ask you once again, please fill that form out. And beyond that, let us know what you think when you go back. And please plug in the PostalVision 2020 and let us know what else we can do to keep this conversation alive with any thoughts you have. And what did I miss? Nothing. the conference.